So I mean, the first sort of line of thought that I think might be interesting to hear from the three of them is where's the value? Is the value of the data? Is it a paying customer base? Is it demonstrating the clinical set? How do you think about value, and how is that different as a startup versus an academic institution versus a company, and how does that shift? So just some thoughts on what is actually the value of this thing. And maybe, Jonny, you can kick us off by why did Jawbone buy BodyMedia?
I don't want to say you have to ask them. I'll tell you why, from my view, why I think they bought BodyMedia, which is that for 12 years of studying the data and 12 years of monitoring, in fact, I can go off data, it's not just for me, but for thousands of people going back years, and a deep understanding of what data means. It takes a long time to understand what the data means and join the dots. And that experience, as well as being FDA, so we're taken very seriously. And we're a company that, the bar set very high for us, and sometimes we chose that, and sometimes, the regulatory environment means that we have to meet that. And they make these wonderful consumer products, but they're very, very new to the whole space, and they have their little hiccup and they're back, and they're all super popular. But they're very new, and we're very old, and I think that's going to be a great combination of what do they know about how to do great consumer products, and what do we really understand about the health issues and the long term, the multi-sensors, but what is it about the data that we can bring provide much more value and make the experience much more enjoyable and compelling.
So Johnny's saying, let me borrow this for a second. So oh, much better. So Johnny's saying, hey, it's the data. So does somebody else have a thought of why would they want to do that? Is the data really the reason? Any other thoughts? Someone that thinks, no, it's actually not the data. It's because Up has not been able to sell what they thought it would be. They're trying to protect the space. It's a protective measure, or I don't know. It's a partnership with a TV deal that allows them to go sort of wide. I don't know. Other thoughts? Does everybody agree? Patents.
Talent.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a talent.
So there's the talent. There's the patents.
It's a total reinvention of the company.
Total reinvention of the company. And do they need it? Because Jawbone needs it.
They're going a whole new path.
Okay, so there's a company that does music electronics going a new path. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. Guys, what are your thoughts in terms of where the value is? For Ubiqi, where's the value? How do you, so 5 years out from the work that you're doing, John, or the work that you're doing, Jackie, how do you monetize that? How do you get financial value out of it, or other type of value? How do you sort of think and perceive a value piece?
My work is motivated from the experience as a clinician, and people desiring to be better, and people desiring to help to make them better. And we live in a world where that's very difficult. And sensors that enable us to collect that data are going to help that become easier for people, but then tools that allow us to work together and to share data across all of these, and then to make decisions about it together and support each other is going to be what it's going to take to help everyone live their healthiest lives. And to make it exciting to be someone who helps people with their health again, right? That's in a decline, that being a nurse, being a doctor is falling off as being a very gratifying and engaging career, and it's becoming more robotic and stressful. But I think we can reinvent a future where we don't need to be just people out there fighting for our health on our own. We can reinvent these fields of nursing and doctoring to be something that's very well aligned with the interests of the consumer. So that's the value of the work that I see, that I'm doing, is to start to take the great work that other people are doing in this field and start to show how we can reinvent and augment its abilities beyond our abilities today.
Yeah, okay, so I wouldn't be doing my job if I wouldn't be pushing some buttons, so let me try, even though sometimes it's hard. So on one side, I am very excited about the technology that you're developing. I'm excited about the link to the existing healthcare system. On the other side, I have this deep skepticism for the healthcare system to have to catch up with every other space out there. And I do a lot of work in health, like many of you, for the most part, healthcare still has the worst experience of any industry that I can think of. And I can think of many other industries. So is it going to take 3 generations of doctors, and unless you get it to the first year of education to actually start thinking differently about the role and together and not one direction, etc., to actually be able to capture that value? Actually, let me take it even further. Is it going to have to take different application process so that we don't qualify for only the things that matter for the medical science side, but we also qualify for things like ability to listen and be good at communicator? Are we going to have to depend on that in order for the value of these types of interactions to be realized?
For some reason, we have this perception in medicine and healthcare that innovation needs to happen at scale. But none of this innovation that we're talking about happens at scale. Otherwise, if you're trying to do it at scale, it's not innovation. It's just sequential progress, right? Real disruptive innovation happens at very small scale. And so that's what we'll do. That the healthcare system is not going to change en masse. It's impossible. It's too big, it's too unwieldy, it's too entrenched in culture. But what if one practice comes along and 10 practices and 100 practices that allow people to get an entirely different experience of health?
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's going to change. It's not going to be changing the existing healthcare system. It's completely replacing it.
Okay.
So that's feasible.
Okay.
Yeah, changing the whole system, no.
Jackie, your thoughts on the value. What's the value of what you're doing, and at what point do some of your investors say, hey, by the way, it's great to have 15,000 users, but when do we get back? Or you're not focusing on that. How do you think of the value in Ubiqi?
Well, we're an early stage startup. We have to focus on that. We have to talk about it. Our investors ask us about it all the time, and so it's a very important and relevant question. And I can do all the self-experimentation and quantified self-experiments on my own, but at the end of the day, I need to make sure that my company is sustainable. And if we think about it from the patient perspective, the people who we are helping, we need the company to be sustainable so that they can continue to get the benefit. So the end game, what my team feels the real value that we're generating for the healthcare system is the insights that are generated from the data. We're able to close the loop on the data that's available to the players in the healthcare industry. Today, nobody really knows what happens to the patient after they leave the pharmacy. So the last stop is that pharmacy, the pharmacy records. What happens to the patient once they go home, nobody really knows. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about value, we as a company need to first deliver value to the patient, because if we're not helping them, if them using the Ubiqi Health tool doesn't help them solve a problem, it doesn't help them feel better, or at least feel that they're trying to move themselves along a path to make themselves feel better, then we're not going to be able to continue to engage them. And it is that continued engagement that ultimately creates the value. It's that longitudinal data set that our partners see as so valuable and will continue to become more valuable in the future.
Okay, so somebody mentioned today, I think it was the second question around behavior change, and sort of at the crux of all of this is, do we want to change, and why do we change, and we're humans, and we like short-term, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Who in your mind is doing something that is really interesting in terms of letting people realize that, sometimes it's hard, but sometimes we like to experiment, and so thinking about going after behavior change in a different way might work. Who are you seeing that is sort of pushing the limits of behavior change out there? And maybe you want to comment also on some of the limitations of the things that you're doing that you think, look, we're still stuck, or no, we have actually untapped it. Just some thoughts on the behavior change side, Johnny. Or anyway.
The first thing that comes to mind is a guy called John Jaqueline, and he's trying to measure how much he has to interact with someone to get the change, and then varying levels. So he'll scale it up or scale it down. So is he calling you every week, or are they sending you emails, or do they have to ask you to come in for a visit, and then can they scale that back to an email every 2 weeks? And so he's trying to see if there isn't just one answer to how much help and nudging and suggestions and coaching somebody needs, but just how can you pitch the right level to get effective change without it becoming a burden, without it becoming too onerous. And so it comes to my mind because he's local, because he's based in Pittsburgh. But that's a really nice approach, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I actually think that it's very difficult to pin one company or person on really affecting behavior change. I actually think that behavior change, it's much broader. It's about a movement, it's about a mindset, and I think in a lot of ways, the quantified self movement, even though it's maybe has a reputation still of being sort of a niche group, it is growing. Obviously the numbers in Boston have been growing, and the ideas of the people who do self-quantification are spreading to the mainstream. I mean, for a long time I was the only nerd in my friend group that would do self-measurement, but now gradually I'm seeing that more and more of my friends are curious about what I was doing, and they're starting to do it a little bit here and there. So when we're talking about behavior change in health, I think it's a whole system. It's how we think about food, it's how we think about work-life balance, and exercise and activity. And I don't think any one device is a magic bullet. It's about having those conversations, and I think a lot of us talked about the empowered patient. So at Ubiqi Health, we're providing tools to help people ask those questions and find the answers to their burning health question. Is this drug really working for me? Is chocolate really triggering my migraines? But really, it's not just that one thing. It's encouraging people, and with what John's doing and with BodyMedia, it's about pushing people to take more responsibility for their health, and that in and of itself is the behavior change.
Yeah, so John, do you want to talk something about behavior change?
Yeah, sure. I just spent a week in the Cook Islands, which was very difficult, but I spent it with 50 or 60 of the top health psychologists in the world. So it was a really interesting experience because there are people who really deeply understand or attempt to understand people's deep motivations and techniques at engaging people. But the problem that they have is they don't have good tools. They use predominantly archaic tools in order to assess people's current state and then to do interventions. And then I spend a lot of time with people on the technology side who have very powerful tools, but fail to often really think deeply about what drives people. And so my assessment there is, let's try and get these two groups together. Or let's try and think more broadly here, and let's shoot for 5 years from now, or even a year from now, to really start to think more broadly than just the data. You need to think about what people's motivations are, how to leverage their ability to socially engage with others about this data. Not just layering it on Facebook, but thinking about how health data is really different. And I think the answers are there, but we need, as a community, we really need to be exploring that intersection.
Yeah. Let me take one more line of thought, and meanwhile get your thoughts or questions ready. So, for the most part, people don't experience science, technology, or medicine, right? I don't care what the electrons do in this thing, or my iPhone, or when I go to my Beth Israel doctor, whether it's a particular type of device that I use for my ultrasound. People experience products, services, and spaces. Not science, not technology, and for the most part, not medicine. So therefore, is there a need, and how do you think about pushing to have a really well thought, designed product or user interface or service? And what have you seen that you think that's the gold standard in the wellness space, in the quantified self space, or in the consumer product related to anything that has to do with people's health? That's the standard that I think we should be having, because there are many devices out there that are completely crappy and that look horrible, and the user interfaces that are horrible are drop-down menus that are just the same as 15 years ago. And at least for many of us in the field, and many conversations going on with some of us and some of the people that we work with here, it's like, oh my goodness, this has got to be, you got to be kidding me. Where do you see, that's really inspiring? And of course you cannot use Apple as an example. Who do you see out there that, that's the type of feel of an experience or a product that I would like to have?
Well, I still have the microphone, so I'll go, but again, I have an answer that's not an answer but an explanation of what I think we need to achieve. what we're seeing in a bunch of our studies that we're running now is it turns out that there are a lot of deficiencies in the things that we created, things that don't work the way they want. Scott and I write this code ourselves, so it's 2 of us, right? And we don't have a product development team, and it's nothing near where we want. But we get results that are bordering on the edge of what you can possibly get with that intervention. And I think what we're finding is that the really key things in offering products in this space is the value proposition, not necessarily the slickness. Now, you've got to have that, but everybody knows that. But you need to make it as slick as possible. But you need to make the value proposition as big as possible. What burdens can you save them from? Where can you save them time? And then you need to have the people that they care about on the other end of that. And then the last piece that I think that is the biggest deficiency in this space is thinking beyond your individual product. That in the next 1 to 5 years, thinking beyond your individual scope and where your data is helpful with the BodyMedia armband, with me doing chronic disease management and management of hypertension with a patient in the clinic using another tool. And how can we not just have an open API to get that data from all these disparate sources, but how can we really leverage a common layer of technology under that? That, yes, the slickness is going to be important, make it clean, make it easy to use, but in the end, you need to think about these bigger value propositions underneath of that. And that's what's really going to make people successful in the next bit, I think.
Last word. Well, I echo John's thought about how it's the seamlessness of quantified self moving forward is going to be very important, so that all the applications and devices need to start to talk to each other, but not only talk to each other, there's APIs and all of that, but the design of the experience needs to be as seamless as possible so that people don't have to download separate spreadsheets and mash up the data. That's what we do in the quantified self meetups, but we can't expect everybody else to. And what's been interesting for me and my team is that none of our users probably even know what quantified self is. And so even though we come to these meetings and think about quantified self, we always have to think from the perspective of, our average user is somebody that's, in the middle of the country, a 45-year-old woman who has a migraine problem, and she just really needs to fix that. And I mean, she's not really the worried well, she's sick. She does have a smartphone, but so does the rest of so do many other people. And I think that in order to think through, to successfully design products to address the market, we also have to think about the demographics. And what's really surprising is that in a study that, in a project that we did with Merck recently, we looked at the demographics of a group of people that we recruited to do quantified self-experiment. And the demographics of the top quartile users were women between 50 and 60, and that was extremely surprising. So the bottom quartile, men in their 30s. Interesting. But that when we think about quantified self, when even investors ask me about our product, they always ask funny questions about demographics, like, well, are you sure this is appropriate for your demographic profile? I mean, are people really going to use this? But I know that they're thinking about me as the sort of target audience. So a woman or a man in his 30s, somebody in his 30s, living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that's really not the target market for chronic disease management. And so I think that's really important in the need. So I'm not sure if I really answered the question.
No, but it's interesting. Johnny, thoughts on?
Can I answer the question as well?
Well, if you want,
Okay,
but if you have an idea, what? What's that gold standard?
In terms of let's try a standard in terms of what.
Okay.
200 people in the room. It's like buying a pair of shoes, I think. So they all do the same thing, but everyone in here has a different pair because they chose it because they like the material and the fit and the shape and the look. And there were so many different decisions that everybody made separately, but it's a thing that does the same thing. So rather than the experience of buying a thing that might have a medical implication to you, like going into into a drugstore on the shelf with kind of white boxes and sort of written pictures of a thing, and they're all identical, and you have to go have one, and it looks ugly, and you put it in the bathroom, is that it's something that you want to have for other reasons, and the other reasons there are more reasons that you, for choosing the thing that you feel very comfortable with. If it's going to do this thing for you, because it's going to integrate, and it's going to collect data, and it's going to analyze for you if you're not a QS, and it's going to let you do it if you want to contribute a bit, but not everybody is committed and is even able to do it. So it's going to do all these things that we talked about in a seamless way, but it's not going to be 200 identical white boxes with some chrome on. It's going to be something like your glasses or your shoes that you've really made an individual choice to make it fit in, so you can feel really comfortable in owning it and enjoy it and forget that it's there until it gives you something useful back.
Okay, so let me turn it over to you. There's mics over there. If you want to stand up, great. If you think you can speak really high, really loud, just raise your hand. Why don't we throw out 2 or 3 questions, let them hear them, and then we can start a conversation. By the way, it shouldn't be just one direction. If you disagree with something that somebody else said out there, please jump in by all means. Please go ahead. If you want to just say your name briefly, just so you know.
John, can we have John illustrate his value proposition using a particular medical condition?
Okay. So the question was, can John illustrate his value proposition using a particular condition? Let's get 2 or 3 questions out because they might be similar, and then you can respond. A couple more. I saw. Yeah. Go. Don't be shy. Otherwise, why you're here?
Yeah.
Go.
So one thing that really got me. Hi. So I'm Charlie. So one thing about data is that we deal with it intellectually. Right? It's something that we talk about numbers versus graphs or something more visual, but also how do we bring in other senses into like not interacting with the data, but being able to have that data inform us. One of the things that you had in your interface was being able to move things around, and that really engages someone. How does like the tactile, auditory, new visualizations, like your simulation, how does that change the way we interact with what we're learning from these devices or anything that's tracking us? So it's not about the data and the numbers, but about like
how we engage with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. One more? Do you want to? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Do you see any devices coming up that are even more invasive? So basically, most of the devices that we spoke about are, touching the skin. They measure, your skin, your sweat, or motion and everything. But you see anything that involves the users actually maybe spitting into something, and they measure any kind of enzyme content in your blood or saliva or anything? Is that in the future, or is there a lot of resistance about anything that involves that level of invasiveness?
Yeah. Yep. Okay, you guys want to take, and you don't feel like you have to say something. Say whatever you want, and then we can, if there's another questions, then we'll find some other questions.
Sure. Yeah, I can. I'll start with this question here. He specifically gave me one case. I'll talk to you about that later, but I can instead maybe give you a case from some of the research that we've done. So what the interaction that we do looks like is for a patient with diabetes, for example, we make some decisions with them up front about starting insulin, for example. So it's a very scary interaction that involves other people in their life, and it's life-changing. And so we sit down with them, we teach them about insulin, we teach them about how to care for it, how to use it, but then we send them home with this app that has a video of all of that so they can see it. And then on a daily basis, they're measuring their blood glucose, taking their medicines, and the first day that they go to inject insulin, we're there with them remotely in a video conference and walk them through it so they're comfortable with it. And then the next time they go to change their dose, we're there with them, we walk through the data, and we suggest what we're thinking based on that data and based on decision support. The next time we do that, another 3 days later, we have them make the decision. Some people are ready to do that the first time. Some people aren't ready to do it until the 10th time. But we have a coach on the other end who's a nurse who manages that transition with them. Their family members can be involved in those calls. Their family members can look at that data with them and help them out with the process. And then gradually we get to the point that the patients just make their decisions on their own. And they feel comfortable with that. And now they've kind of been guided through this process. And they're much more engaged individuals in it. And it has all those components of How do you articulate things to family members that previously you weren't able to, that they didn't understand why you were making the decisions you were making, even though it was affecting your health, but now you're all engaged in that, so you have a platform for it.
Okay.
And just a quick answer to that question, there are people who are making sensors in your toilet that you urinate in and they measure metabolites, breath sensors for bathroom mirrors, they're making pills that have acid, stomach acid, activated microchips that emit signals, so all of that stuff is coming. But until that data is actually usable to the people who are collecting it, nobody's going to want to use any of those things and have it invade their homes. But if it allows them to quantify themselves to the extent that they can relieve some burden in their life or make their life better in some way, then they will. And that's the challenge.
Other thoughts on either invasion or the ability to engage with the data, and does that have a different effect on how you actually understand and see the data? Let me let you think while I give my answer. So this is probably the device that I've spoken about the most over the last whatever months in CES. So this is it's an environmental sensor, and it measures 4 different things. It's called MyLabka. It measures temperature and humidity in one. It measures radiation, so it's a Geiger counter. It measures EMF, so different devices will emit different types of waves. And this one measures nitrates, so I can plug it in and put it in an apple and in a pear. Is it functional? Absolutely not. But it is the best so far device that I have seen that integrates a physical design with an app that lets me touch, play, move the data a little bit. So to your point, Charlie, the reason that it's engaged me so much is because it allows me to physically get into doing and pushing and playing and seeing as I'm measuring, as I'm thinking about what is that measure. Do I need a Geiger counter in Cambridge, Massachusetts? Probably not. Or, it's just, not. In my kitchen, do I play nitrates every day? No. But I think it's an example. It's one example. I think something that was done really, really well by a couple of guys that are in San Francisco, where you also see, this could have been a typical device plastic cable, like any other. But they picked this material that almost feels like a nice, elegant shoelace. So you start to see these different elements, of course, wood, right, etc. Anyway, so this is one example where I don't use it all, the data is useless, so where the value is definitely not there. But I've engaged and used this more and talked about this more than any other device that I've tried in the last year.
Yeah, everybody wants to know the spelling.
Labka, so MyLabka, it's MyLapka.com. And we have nothing to do with them, more than I met the guys at CES, and they have the most beautiful stand of anyone at CES in Vegas, which was this simple wood table and a couple of these explaining well what they do. Anyway, look at and the website is gorgeous because it actually shows you internally what the thing does. Anyway, just little details around how to engage you in a different way. Thoughts? Yeah?
Since you just said it was useless, I was going to give you a use for the nitrate sensor. So one, are you a runner?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you should test the nitrate content of various things like beets, spinach, etc., and then go for runs and see how your performance improves. Also, measure your blood pressure. Try that. Just, so now you have a use for it.
Okay. Great. Jackie, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, it's just about the how people interact with their data, and of course, today we may be constrained by some of the interfaces, but of course, as technology improves and there's different ways we can allow people to interact with their data. I mean, even now, if we just think about health data and how, John showed some really good examples, but there's more and more that people can interact and move things around, and the more sort of three-dimensional you make that experience, of course, the more engaging it can be. And of course, if that experience is related to the problem they're trying to solve, so much better. I mean, it's sort of hard to imagine it now, but you were mentioning things like smells, right? So we're talking about some food issues. I mean, if you can make the data smell, or if you can feel it in some way that's meaningful, then that's going to really make an impact on how people are going to remember. Because people also remember things in different ways. Some people remember visually, some people remember orally, for example. So absolutely, we have to be able to push that envelope, but I think we have to also be patient and wait for the technology to come.
I can get 2 out of 3. One reason there's not a lot of direct manipulation with our data right now is a cautiousness in that we're being regulated, and the notion of, well, if they change that, if they diagnose, the view of how you might diagnose and interpret the data might not be the correct one, and if we control it so you can't move and touch and change things, then we know that the only interpretation is one that we can validate and then we can clear. So we're being very cautious. On the other hand, what we do in my group is that we play and we make things that are, we're beginning to have a bit more joy with the data and realize that we've got to separate the diagnostic bit from the learning and the self-knowledge discovery bit.
Jonny, hold on. Let me ask you then if separate of the number of people and separate from the money side, the business model, would you rather today not have the FDA regulation piece and be able to just have it be a non-FDA device?
It's a complicated answer because I would like all devices, so I'm very pleased that in our device we took the sort of the good scientific method and the good design method and the good whatever the heck it is method to be really sure that what we're doing is what we're doing and what we're telling you is correct. And whether we were regulated or not, I think we would have done that. And then, but being regulated, we had to do it. So the question is, if we weren't, would we have done it? Well, we might have taken some shortcuts, and maybe we would have had more fun stuff. Would it have been as high quality in a narrower but as high quality? I'm not sure of the answer. So yeah, now that we're there, now that we've done it, you can't undo it. And I'm pleased it's raised the standard on we have to think a lot harder about everything. It connects to your question about spit and let's stick something on our stomach and let's be a bit more invasive. Is that those things? Yeah, those things are happening and there are real things you can go get, and there's a lot of work on those. Do I want to go near those? The order of magnitude of regulation of what you can do with those is so much higher than something that's safe and non-invasive and very low risk. That we follow those things to the point that can we make them so that you don't have to spit, stab, touch, but so that the experience can be more pleasant overall, and you don't need to think that it's not going to be pleasant and it might hurt or it might be frightening. Just think I'm just going to do it and it's going to work, and that's the area I'm interested in. And are they great? Yeah, but if you want something to do that, then you've got to think, oh, that's 5 years away before you get it, because it's just so hard to make the products, and just because you're not allowed to make them until you've done all the steps that
to get there. Yeah. Let's take 2 more questions and a couple more, and then we'll have, we want to make sure, originally we said this is 6 to 9, because we do want to make sure that there's time for you guys to interact in any way you want. First, Damien, you had your hand up, and then we'll go. So, do you want to throw yours?
Thank you so much. My name is Damien. I wanted to ask you guys, from a fellow nerd myself, do you think it's inherent problems within the healthcare industry of the professionals on how we see the market? And 2 is, have you thought about the emotional contagion? So many other industries are able to spread their technology or their innovations through the emotional impact and touching people, much more than tactile senses from the 5 senses, but heart and minds, if you will. That mindset that Jaqueline was talking about earlier. Have you guys thought about that, and what are some potential solutions?
Okay, let's take one more, and then we can bring it back. And then if we have more time, we can go ahead.
I was just trying to look up what I think is the most successful quantified self company of all time is Weight Watchers. Last I checked, it's a $2 billion company, charge $50 a month. So I'm particularly interested in the contrast between BodyMedia and Weight Watchers, and even with respect to price points. So where they can get away with charging something that in a few months they could have bought one of your devices, but I don't think you guys were acquired for $2 billion. So what is it that they've done so well, and in some respects continue to do well, and what can we learn from them as we try to build devices that integrate into people's lives, while at the same time trying to build successful companies?
Take both or any of them, or take it on.
Sure. You might have noticed that I'm from Europe, from England. So some of the answer to the notion of why doesn't it spread and the hearts and minds is don't throw rocks. To me, it's the notion, to me, it's a cultural one of the way the system's organized. And so there's so much more preventative medicine in Europe because we've all paid for it beforehand, and you don't have to pay for it, we don't have to worry about reimbursement, and you don't have to pay for insurance. The notion that if the nation sees that it's sensible to spend a bit of money now to make you happier and healthier, they'll save a lot later because you won't get sick and old and need looking after then. Whereas here, it might not pay off for one person to give you preventative medicine, stop you doing 65 years later when you're under a different plan and a different place, and they don't reap the benefit of that. So part of the answer maybe as to why things take off in different places differently is the cultural attitude and the financial organization of paying for healthcare, and then the way people think about it. You've gone, but and I'm trying to remember exactly what you asked. If you join, I think this is right. I might be wrong, but I think you're right in terms of the amount that programs like that charge, because you're getting personal tuition and coaching every week. That if you join the top level Jenny Craig classes club, you get an armband anyway thrown in the price, because you're right, the price of the armband is cheap, and we have the proven outcome that you'll by seeing your stats and your numbers at home, you'll lose more weight anyway. It'll be more effective at the end of the year, 9 months later, that it's going to work better. So they just decided to bundle it in because it's not a big additional cost. We go to Amazon and buy our device for $75 to $110 or something, and we're $6 a month, I think. I don't know for sure because I get it for free. There's real benefit to people who need a lot of coaching, and we have another partner, 24-hour Fitness, mainly on the West Coast, big chain of gyms, who have a lot of personal trainers. And if you don't know how to exercise, having a personal trainer can get you fantastic results that you can't get if you don't understand about good form and good technique. You can watch how people use the different machines, but having somebody be there and spending the money to be taught and learn that will pay off in the end. If you understand how to exercise, then you don't need that part, but maybe we can tell you something else. If you don't know how to eat, we give you food advice. We partner with Jillian Michaels of The Biggest Losers as a champion of us, because she was using the devices on the show. So she has lots of menus and food, specific menus for a month, telling you exactly what to eat for every meal, what to go buy at the grocery store. And so if you need that advice because you're just terrible at making those decisions, then it's worth it because the end result is worth it. And so there isn't one answer. Do you understand how to buy food and cook it? Do you understand good form and good technique? If you don't, go learn it because it pays off. But once you've got that, then the monitoring, the longer term monitoring, now you know how to do the things, but how are the results? And sometimes you're not very objective about yourself, and so having objective numbers about, are you really doing well? Are you staying on plan? Then that's where BodyMedia, I think, fits in.
Thoughts and think, if you have one question that is just going to be so good that everybody's going to say, wow, I'm so glad that that person asked the question, make sure you raise your hand after Jackie, if you wanted to say something.
Well, sure. I mean, just 2 quick comments here. So on the hearts and minds issue, I think healthcare is a difficult one because, I mean, it's not really aspirational. I mean, I'm not sure what industries you were thinking of when you were thinking about being able to, propagate a change by capturing the hearts and minds, but healthcare is not entertainment. It's one of those things that people want to ignore. It's almost like finance, right? So people don't really want to think about their financial situation either. It's kind of one of those things. You have to think about it, okay, I have to do something with my 401k, or it's tax time. Mint.com did pretty well in the financial industry in terms of, you could think of Mint.com being quantified self for personal finance. But still, I would bet that the most avid users of Mint.com are people who are actually in pretty good financial shape already, like reasonably well, because I have to say that being an entrepreneur, I have gone through some times where my financial health wasn't so great, and I stopped looking at my Mint.com because it was so depressing. So, I mean, if you think about that as an analogy to health, we're actually fighting the same battle. But who wants to look at their data when it shows them that they're, you know, fat and, you know, you've got hypertension and all of those problems? And so what we need to do, and that's part of the design challenge, is to be able to turn it on the positive. And you know, what we've found from our user base that's interesting is that there's also an altruistic part. So if you have an affliction, you're going through a hard time, but somehow our users have felt that they would like to help other people. And, you know, oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this too. Well, it makes me feel better because I've gone through it, and therefore, you know, if we pool our data, maybe we can learn something about each other and help ourselves.
Okay. So let me see if there's that hand that is like, oh, sorry, go ahead, John. Of course, of course.
Just because I think that this is what is going to change medicine. Right now, 70% of people in this country have a chronic disease. And they spend, those people who have chronic diseases spend an inordinate amount of their time discussing going to doctor's office visits and the frustration that they have. And I think if we can provide them delight in this experience.
So when you say this, just so I understand, when you say this, is that the aggregate of the BodyMedias, the Ubiqis, the Your System? Is it that collective? We're just going to have to try 150 of these, and little by little we'll start addressing chronic disease? Is that what you mean by this is what's going to change it?
No, I'm saying the question was about delight in the experience and this emotional contagion. Spreading innovation in an area, and I think absolutely it's going to make a difference. And I think your point is well taken, but in that you thought that people don't want to look at it if it's a dire situation, but that is heavily dependent on what action they can take. If you give them action that they can take, and they can take something that was previously burdensome and arduous, and you can suddenly make it delightful, and they can start to tell their friends about it, and it changes their life. The number of people that are affected by this and how much it interferes with their work and their families, that there's a tremendous potential for appealing to the psychological aspects of this and getting things to spread like wildfire. But it takes that tipping point of really achieving delight in the experience.
Okay. Great. So is there one more, and that is just so amazing, and then people will rate. Look at each other, and some of you have already asked, so it's amazing. You know, we have two here. You guys decide. Look at each other and make sure that you can tell who. All right, go, sir. Let's do this last one. Go.
It's yours.
Oh, it's mine?
Yeah.
All right.
Get ready, everybody.
Okay, let me try to be very diplomatic. Okay, so most of the advice that Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers give is crap. And most of the advice that doctors give, not most, okay, substantial part is crap. So partially patients don't comply because the advice is bad. Now, there is a lot of data, there will be a lot of data from many patients that comes together. So how can we, what shall I say, motivate the medical community to change based on this data that they collect, what advice they give? Because,
well, I don't think it's so easy. I think it's a great question because it ties back to what you were talking about, Jonny, which really impacted me, is the fact that you have all this data that's really meaningful that could change the way we think about fitness and how people are involved in that, but you're not letting anyone use it. And then this is the promise of all of this technology that we're doing, is the real promise is that we can change the game completely. Doctors are crap at providing recommendations. Less than 50% of the time do they do what's right. And the way we change that game is we allow patients to be involved in co-producing that data, and we allow it to them explore it together where we don't know the answers. But the problem is that regulation is only letting you do where you know the answers. And that is a scary, scary thought.
Okay.
Because medicine sucks now because we have this archaic way of finding answers. It's randomized controlled trials. The future is the giant prospective cohort. So that this is a great challenge. How do we convince them to say, hey, we've got to go through a little bit of a murky area to find this future that will just blow everything out of the water?
John,
that's
Yeah, I gotta answer that.
Johnny, you have 2 minutes because then we're going to wrap up. So go.
You were a sideways drop that you went through me. So two answers. One in terms of do we share the data? Just to be clear, we don't share it with many people. The only person we give all our data to is a group at the NIH. So there is a group at the NIH with a big group of full-time data analysts who came to us and said, well, we know where all the diseases are happening. We have everybody has to report things to us, and we know what's going on where, but we don't know how people are behaving in these places. So we've given them all our behavioral data so that they can match up what is happening. But I'm not sure whether you were saying we didn't on purpose. But
1 minute.
What I thought was an easy answer to how can why would the medical community make a change? Because we discover something, why would they do that? All of our outcome studies, we measure cost of outcome per patient. So there's often very interesting, because all these things the insurance companies know exactly how much it costs to treat each patient for a particular condition. And then our outcome studies show that, well, using this device and some simple, information tools to give them some feedback, the actual cost of this treatment is however many factors of magnitude lower. And that's the way to in the US where everything has to be reimbursed. It's actually maybe easier to enact a change there because money flows.
What I was trying to say is to compliment you on saying that you've created something that has this tremendous value, but to say that the system is at fault for not engaging in its full value. And what you're saying is great that someone gets that full data set, but it's the same people who have been driving the research and driving the direction for decades. They're not the people that are really going to innovate with that data. The people who are going to innovate is all those users out there who live with it, and other people who have interesting ideas of combining it with other data sets. And that's what we really need to get over to change that situation.
Let me first thank John. Always great to catch up and see what you're doing, and it's come along since the first time we met quite far. Jackie, great to meet you. Thank you for sharing what you're doing. Johnny, great to have you here, all the way from the other latitude and the other latitude. It's great to hear what you're doing. First of all, let me ask you to thank these guys for coming here.